January 23, 1935. 11:47 p.m. Harlem. Lenox Avenue. The word landed wrong, not shouted, not thrown, just set down in the smoke like a lit match. Dutch Schultz leaned back in his chair, grin crooked, whiskey breath rolling across the table as jazz bled through the walls. His fedora shadow split his face in half, eyes glassy with the kind of arrogance that mistakes money for ownership. Across from him, Bumpy Johnson didn't move. His hands rested flat on the table, dark skin against polished wood, steady enough to make the room uneasy. The men behind him felt it first, that tightening in the chest when something sacred gets stepped on. A bottle slipped and shattered. Nobody laughed. Schultz kept smiling. He'd never learned what silence meant. "You hear me?" he said, softer now, dangerous with confidence. "You boys forget who owns this street?" Bumpy looked up. His eyes weren't angry. They were calm, the kind of calm that comes after the decision's already been made. He drew in a slow breath, tasting cigar smoke and insult, and held it. Outside, snow drifted down on Harlem, covering the sidewalks in white like a lie. Bumpy leaned forward until Schultz could smell his cologne, clean, deliberate. "You didn't just speak to me," he said quietly. "You spoke to a whole neighborhood." Schultz laughed. That laugh would echo all week. Because what Schultz didn't see, what nobody in that room fully understood, was that Harlem ran on memory, on respect, on the kind of pride that doesn't argue. It collects. And starting tonight, it was keeping score. By sunrise, the phones would ring. By tomorrow night, blood would darken the snow. And by the end of the week, 56 men would be dead, most of them never knowing why. Bumpy turned away first. And that's when the war finally noticed it had begun. January 19, 1935. 6:08 a.m. Harlem River Docks. 4 days before the word was spoken, Bumpy Johnson stood alone at the edge of the water, watching fog peel itself off the river like a bad memory. The cold bit through his coat, settled into his bones. He welcomed it. Cold kept the mind sharp. Harlem was changing again. It always did before blood. Bootleg trucks rolled in before sunrise. Numbers runners whispered totals in doorways. Cops took envelopes without eye contact. And somewhere downtown, Dutch Schultz was tightening his grip, squeezing every street that made a dollar and didn't belong to him. Schultz didn't hate Harlem. Hate required effort. He simply didn't respect it. That was his weakness, mistaking silence for surrender. He thought money erased history. Thought fear traveled faster than loyalty. It had worked everywhere else. But Harlem remembered things. Bumpy did too. He remembered being underestimated. Remembered white mobsters calling him useful instead of dangerous. Remembered every deal where he was expected to bow his head and smile. His power came from patience. But patience had limits, and Dutch Schultz was leaning on them hard. By noon, the rumors reached him. Schultz's men were shaking down black-owned speakeasies, charging protection twice, beating runners who didn't pay fast enough, sending messages that didn't need words. By nightfall, Bumpy's lieutenant, Flash Walker, was dead in an alley behind 133rd Street. Shot twice. No robbery. No warning. That was the real beginning. Bumpy knelt beside the body while snow soaked through his trousers, blood darkening the white ground. He closed Flash's eyes himself. Slow. Gentle. "Not tonight," he whispered. "But soon." This was the balance Bumpy walked every day. Violence weighed against survival. If he struck too fast, Harlem burned. If he waited too long, it bled anyway. His fear wasn't death. It was losing control of the storm once it started. And Schultz? Schultz was afraid of only one thing, being laughed at. That's why the insult came later. Why it had to be public. Why it had to cut deep. Because Schultz believed humiliation ended men faster than bullets. He was wrong. The meeting on Lenox Avenue was supposed to calm things. A show of dominance. A reminder of who pulled strings and who danced. Instead, it became a fuse. And even now, 4 days before 56 bodies hit the pavement, the city was already choosing sides. Most of them didn't know it yet. But the snow did. January 24, 1935. 2:31 a.m. Midtown Manhattan. West 46th Street. The first body fell in silence. A Schultz runner named Eddie Red Malloy never saw the car slow behind him, never heard the door open. Just felt a hand on his shoulder, familiar, friendly, before the knife slid under his ribs and lifted. Clean. Professional. No rage. No message left behind. By dawn, Eddie would be found face down in a slush-filled gutter, pockets untouched. By noon, 3 more men would join him. This was how Bumpy Johnson fought, not loud, not proud. Surgical. Each death a question mark. Each missing soldier a whisper traveling faster than gunfire. Schultz noticed by breakfast. Phones rang unanswered. Collections came in light. 2 speakeasies paid Harlem men instead of his. That irritated him. Missing men frightened him. He smashed a mirror in his hotel suite, blood dripping from his knuckles as he smiled at his own reflection. "They're bluffing," he told his crew. "They always bluff." But even as he said it, something twisted in his gut. Because Harlem wasn't announcing anything. No warnings. No demands. No public revenge. Just absence. By nightfall, Schultz's men began dying in pairs. 1 shot in a doorway. 1 pushed from a fire escape. 1 found floating in the East River, throat open like a ledger. Each death disconnected. Each method different. Police called it coincidence. The underworld didn't. Bumpy sat in a back room above a bar on 135th, listening to reports come in between puffs of a cigarette. His face never changed. Inside, the weight pressed heavier with every name. This was the line he feared crossing, violence that couldn't be pulled back. Men who wouldn't come home. Mothers who'd ask questions Harlem couldn't answer. But he'd been pushed there. And once a storm starts, it doesn't negotiate. Then came the betrayal. One of Bumpy's own, a courier named Leon, didn't check in. By midnight, word came that he'd been seen talking to Schultz's people. By 1 a.m., his body was found burned inside a stolen car in the Bronx. That wasn't Bumpy's order. Schultz was escalating, sending a message written in fire. The city felt it instantly, that shift when quiet violence turns loud. When rules begin to rot. When men start shooting first and asking names later. Bumpy crushed his cigarette into the ashtray and stood. "Now," he said softly. Outside, engines turned over. Guns were loaded. Doors slammed. And somewhere downtown, Dutch Schultz poured another drink, unaware that the next move would decide who survived the week. January 26, 1935. 9:18 p.m. Harlem. 138th Street warehouse. The doors were supposed to stay closed. They didn't. Cold air knifed through the warehouse as headlights carved white tunnels across stacked crates. Men froze mid-breath. Someone cursed. Someone else reached, too late. Gunfire cracked, short and brutal, echoing off brick like breaking bones. This wasn't a raid. It was an execution schedule gone wrong. Bumpy Johnson stood behind a support beam, coat open, revolver heavy in his hand. The smell hit first, oil, dust, fierce sweat. He listened to boots scramble, to a man sobbing as he tried to remember how to pray. His jaw tightened. He hadn't planned this tonight, which meant Schultz had. A Thompson roared from the catwalk. Wood splintered. A Harlem shooter went down screaming, clutching his leg, blood pooling fast. Bumpy fired once, measured, and the gunman above pitched forward, crashing through crates in a rain of nails and paper. "Fall back," Bumpy shouted. But the word never reached everyone, because that's when Schultz walked in. Not hiding, not rushing. Calm as a man entering his own house. Fedora low, coat buttoned, eyes shining with something close to joy. "You see," Schultz called out. "This is what happens when people forget their place." Bumpy stepped into the open. Silence slammed down harder than gunfire. Men on both sides stopped moving. Guns hovered. No one breathed. 2 kings finally sharing the same air. Schultz smiled. There he is. Bumpy felt it then, the trap's shape. The warehouse. The timing. The burned courier. Schultz hadn't been reacting. He'd been drawing the map. "You wanted a lesson," Schultz said. "I wanted an ending." Bumpy raised his gun, not at Schultz but just enough for everyone to see. "You insulted a people," he said. "This is the bill." Schultz laughed, sharp and cracking. I insulted you. That was the truth. And that was the mistake. A shot rang out, not from either of them. Glass exploded behind Schultz as one of his own men spun, shocked, a red bloom opening on his chest. Another dropped. Then another. Bumpy's eyes flicked left. The shadows moved. Harlem had come early. Schultz's smile finally slipped. He reached for his gun. And in that single second, that thin slice of time, the week's bloodshed balanced on who pulled first. Remember this moment. Because everything broke right here. January 27, 1935. 4:52 a.m. Harlem Hospital corridor. The floor was slick with melted snow and blood no one had time to clean. Doctors moved fast. No names. No questions. Just hands, towels, needles. Men groaned behind curtains. Some didn't. The warehouse had vomited survivors into the night, but it had kept more than it released. By sunrise, the count was impossible to hide. Bodies stacked in alleys, slumped in cars, floating where the river slowed. The newspapers would print numbers. The streets spoke names. 56 men in 7 days. And the city felt hollowed out. Schultz vanished after the warehouse. Not dead, not victorious. Just gone. His organization cracked instead of collapsed, splintering into scared pieces that didn't trust each other anymore. Men slept with guns under pillows. Women packed bags without asking why. Every knock sounded like the end. That was the real aftermath. Fear didn't scream. It whispered. Bumpy Johnson stood at a window overlooking Lenox Avenue as morning came pale and exhausted. Harlem was awake but quieter. Shops opened slow. Runners kept their heads down. A neighborhood counting the cost of surviving pride. He had won. And he hated that word. Flash was still dead. Leon was still burned. Mothers would still cry. Harlem had kept its spine, but it had paid in flesh. Power always sends the bill later. A lieutenant asked him if they should hunt Schultz down. Finish it. Make the ending permanent. Bumpy didn't answer right away. This was his inner war, the line he never wanted to cross. Killing to defend was one thing. Killing to erase was another. Once you do that, the street owns you forever. No, he said finally. Let him run. Fear was punishment enough. Across town, Schultz sat in a dark room, hands shaking as he poured a drink he couldn't finish. He stared at the wall like it might speak back. For the first time in his life, someone had refused to be small for him. That terrified him. The insult that started everything never appeared in print. It didn't need to. The underworld already knew. Respect had been demanded. Blood had answered. And memory would do the rest. By nightfall, Harlem breathed again, wounded, watchful, alive. But everyone understood the truth now. This wasn't over. It had just learned how far it could go. January 30th, 1935. 11:59 p.m. Harlem. Sugar Hill Overlook. The city looked calm from up here. Lights hummed. Trains rattled in the distance. Snow melted into dark veins along the sidewalks, carrying the last evidence of the week away. To anyone watching from far enough back, it almost looked like peace. Bumpy Johnson knew better. Peace wasn't quiet. Peace was respected. He stood alone, coat collar turned up, hands resting on the railing, feeling the cold metal bleed into his palms. 56 men. That number would follow him longer than any nickname ever could. Not because he regretted the choice, but because he understood the weight of it. Every dead man had a story. Every story left a shadow. And shadows stacked fast. Behind him, Harlem kept moving. That was the victory. Kids still laughed. Stores still opened. Music still spilled out of windows. The neighborhood hadn't bowed. It hadn't broken. That mattered. Dutch Schultz never came back to Harlem the same way. His name still traveled, but softer. Cautious. Men stopped repeating it with pride and started using it as a warning. Power learned something that we could never forget. You can own streets. You can buy men. But you can't insult a people and expect to walk away clean. Bumpy lit a cigarette and watched the smoke drift upward, disappear into night. He knew the cost would keep coming. Lawmen. Rivals. Allies who'd test him just to see if the legend was true. That was the price of standing tall. Someone once asked him if it was worth it. He'd answered with the truth then, and it hadn't changed now. If I bend, he'd said, my children grow up bent too. That week became a rumor. Then a lesson. Then a line nobody crossed again without thinking twice. Harlem didn't need to shout after that. Its silence was enough. Bumpy flicked the cigarette into the dark and turned away from the view. Tomorrow would bring new deals, new threats, new compromises with the devil that ran every city worth fighting for. But tonight the ledger was closed. For now. Because history doesn't end, it waits. And the streets of New York were already sharpening their memory for the next man who forgot what respect costs. Harlem slept that night. But the underworld didn't. Not even close.